this. In the past couple months, we've seen story after story of sexual assault and bullying in Hollywood, particularly amongst men of power. So men of power are the ones that are sexually assaulting and bullying folks. And here's a film in the 1980s wherein the villain is a bully who sexually assaults and threatens people, and that's Biff Tannen, obviously. But there's also this sense that George McFly is sort of I don't know of a better word. George McFly is sort of a weenie. And in fact, a core part of this story is seeing George change. Are those two messages at conflict with one another? That being what bullies look like and what victims look like. Also, what can we learn about this topic, especially since it's so relevant to us right now, from Back to the Future as a film?
I think actually George is a victim for sure. But Lorraine is more of the standard victim that we're more accustomed to, right? Like she's not the weenie. Absolutely. She just is a regular person who just happens to be harassed, really. Like not even like the sexual harassment that does come later on in the film, but like the constant like asking out, like the constant trying to be in her face and tell people that she's with him and stuff. That it really makes George look like a good guy, even though he might not even be a great guy. I mean, he's like a peeping Tom. But it makes Marty look like the hero, really, because he's teaching his dad how to be a stand-up guy. And we see Marty being that stand-up guy as far as, it's his mom or whatever, but, like, you want to protect your mom. But, like, he kind of, steps up to Biff, too, at a time when he sees his mom being harassed.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you brought that up because Lorraine has the traditional, like what we're seeing in Hollywood right now. Right? Like she's the one that's like sexually assaulted and harassed throughout the film. And George is the one who's bullied. There's some slight differences in how those occur, but they're very relevant in both cases. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Yeah.
This sort of speaks to what I was saying a little bit earlier, too, about Marty affecting the characters around him.
Yeah.
Because, yes, Lorraine is the sexual assault victim and George is the bullying victim.
Yeah.
But like you said, George is a bit of a weenie, so he sort of makes himself bullyable. And I feel like Lorraine, especially when Marty first encounters her in the 50s after getting hit by the car, she's pretty aggressive. Like, she's like...
Well, they even make a joke of that in the film because she says in 1985, she says, it is so inappropriate for a girl to ask a guy out.
Yeah.
And then in the past, you see her just like totally taking control of all the...
So she's aggressive. Not that at all in any way means it's okay to sexually assault somebody. It never is. It doesn't matter. But it shows an area that all of these characters need to grow in a little bit over the course of the movie. And they do. She becomes more level-headed. She kind of calms down. George becomes braver. He gets more courage. He's not such a weenie. One of the few flaws, when you look at the bullying thing and you look at Biff as a bully, I wish that Biff's change was represented a little bit better. Because what is the ultimate change for Biff? He basically just switches places with George, right? He becomes the guy waxing the car, and he becomes the loser.
Yes.
So it's like, that's a good little revenge tale, like the bully becomes the loser, But I would rather see him grow and understand why bullying is wrong and get redeemed from it and grow up a little bit and mature.
Yeah.
And not that he didn't do that, but we don't see it. The other characters grow, and Biff never does.
The portrayal of George as a weenie, I think, can teach us two things. The first is it is really important for us to encourage victims of bullying, to come alongside victims of bullying with support, and also to stand up for them. I also think it's really important to help teach victims how to stand up for themselves, because we see this, because we see George do this. There's this moment in the film where he finally asks Lorraine to dance, and he's dancing with Lorraine after he's already stood up for himself. He's now dancing with Lorraine, and then that redheaded kid, who's always a punk in 80s movies, by the way.
Seriously. I hate that guy.
80s movies, I know. He's like typecast. But he butts in, right? And there's this moment where we're thinking like, nope, George is just going to go right back to being George. And he doesn't. He actually overcomes it. So he's taught how not to be a victim. He's taught that he can overcome this situation on his own. While we do want to stand up to bullies and we want to help victims stand up to bullies, we also don't want to keep them in the victim stage. where they just keep repeating that stage over and over again.
I always talk about legacy as somebody that loves legacy and storytelling. I love that moment in the movie because the occurrence that brings Marty back from the brink of literally fading away is his dad stepping up and being braver.
Yes. And
So
not
that.
from a reactionary standpoint in terms of like before when he punches Biff for the first time, it's like
It's self-defense.
what
in
else is
some
he
way.
gonna do?
Yeah,
it's like
he has to.
he's either doing that or like so it's not as impactful of a choice.
Yeah.
Whereas that second choice is the development of the character.
Yeah. The emphasis is more on him stepping up and being brave that saves Marty
Exactly.
than it is necessarily the two of them getting together.
My one warning, and this would be the wrong message I think to take from the film, and I don't think the film is trying to tell us this. We would not want to assume that bullying is somehow an acceptable form of toughening George up. In fact, I would argue that the film shows that he's never going to get tough if he stays in the victim bullied mode. I don't think we can say that George deserves the treatment that he's getting because he's a weenie. We
Right.
should not come to that conclusion.
Right.
In regards to Biff, it isn't quite as nuanced as bullying in real life.
No, yeah, it's very much like everyone in the cafeteria is staring at him when he calls George a name. Like, but at the same time, I think that high school is a little bit like that in the sense that you don't mess with the bully, so everybody kind of just like allows them to do whatever.
Right.
And they just all look on and be like, oh, sorry, man. I've witnessed that before. The cool kid is kind of the bully because nobody wants to tell him that he's not cool.
High school is a kind of a different dynamic.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything's sort of more extreme,
Right.
But in the adult bullying situations, the tactics are so subtle. So, first of all, they're adept at using their leverage as a threat to other people. So we're seeing that in all these sexual assault cases that we're seeing in Hollywood, right? One of the main reasons that people are getting away with this is because those people are perceived to have enough power
Yes.
to prohibit other people from achieving what they want to achieve in their lives. And they are adept at using that leverage as this subtle threat. They don't even have to say it. They don't have to, they don't have to verbalize like, well, if you don't let me sexually assault you, then obviously I'll ruin your career. They just have to at least like even hint at it. A lot of times bullies will use friendship and this apologetic cycle to make the victims think that it's all over. So victims tend to have this like PTSD where they're going through the scenario and they're thinking like, oh my gosh, that was so terrible. I don't know how I'm going to get over this. But then the bully comes back alongside them, usually doesn't apologize, but treats them so well that the victim goes, okay, that was an isolated incident. It's not going to happen again.
Right.
Then it does happen again. And it's this constant cycle the film teaches us we should stand up to bullies. I think that there's an assumption that that means that there's violence associated with it. Because like back in the day, you'd see like the playground fight. And it's like, well, just stand up to the bully. And then eventually he ends up punching him and it's a battle, right? But I don't think that that necessarily, especially as we talk to adults, I don't think violence is standing up. I think you have to have boundaries and you have to be able to say like, no, I'm not doing that. Usually bullies are allowed to bully because they do it in isolation. They're a person that generally has some sort of power and they're bullying other people in an isolated incident, which is very different from the school cafeteria example, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's a different type scenario.
That's a machismo scenario.
Exactly, exactly. But in real life, a lot of times it's an isolated situation, and one of the ways to take power away from the bully is to expose that isolated behavior in a more public setting, which is what we're seeing now with the sexual assault cases, right? Like the more volume and the more people, the more that becomes a real thing that we can all understand as society. To back up your point, Daryl, is bullies need help. They are villains. They should, especially in this case of these sexual assault cases in Hollywood, they should face consequences for that, no question. But there should be some sort of redemption that we can hope for them. Even if that redemption is like for a Harvey Weinstein, which is basically like, dude needs to be in prison for the rest of his life. But hopefully he can still, through prison, figure out that what he was doing was super wrong and have some semblance of feeling sorry about that. He's still going to stay in prison. We're not going to let him out.
The redemption thing is, I feel like that should always be the goal in any source of conflict. Sure, the fight itself can end and a person can stop being a bully. But unless there's some sort of growth, unless there's a change to the problem to begin with, it's never going to go away. the goal should always be some sort of greater understanding and deeper change rather than just stop bullying me. You know what I mean?